Good morning, and a big welcome to our distinguished guests and dedicated advocates who are with us at this crucial summit on ending sex trafficking. I'm Andrea Martone. I'm the Director of Communication for Selah Freedom, and your presence here reflects our shared commitment to protect the vulnerable and bring hope to survivors of the sex trade. As we gather today, let us remember the resilience of those who have endured and the power that we hold to create change. Together, we will forge innovative solutions, strengthen our networks, and amplify our collective voice. Every single step we take brings us closer to a Florida free from the plague of human trafficking. Let us approach our task with unwavering determination, compassion, and the knowledge that our efforts will change lives. Before I introduce the panelists here and some distinguished guests in the audience, I would like to ask Bonnie Carlson of Grace Community Church to lead us all in a brief prayer that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bonnie. I work in outreach at Grace Community Church, where we've had the honor for many years to partner alongside Selah Freedom and everything that they're doing in this community and far beyond. I'm grateful to be here this morning and humbled to lead this summit in prayer to our Heavenly Father. Will you please join me in prayer? Compassionate God, we gather to address the grave issue of sex trafficking. Guide our hearts and minds as we seek solutions to end this injustice. Grant us wisdom, courage, and empathy to protect the vulnerable, support survivors, and bring perpetrators to justice. May our efforts lead to a world where all people are free from exploitation and can live with dignity. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I'd like to recognize some distinguished attendees here with us in the audience and ask that you please stand when I call your name. Sarasota Mayor Liz Albert. Superintendent of Sarasota Schools, Dr. Terry Connor. Savannah Stewart, District Aide to State Republican Fiona McFarland, who could not attend. I'd also like to give a big shout out to Chris Yates, who is the Network Marketing Director for Christian Television Network. They are a summit partner of Selah, and they are televising this summit live on their network nationally. The summit filming will be available to view on Selah Freedom's website. Thank you all for your commitment and shared vision, and let our work begin. Finally, our distinguished guests. The first, Joshua Cornelius. Joshua Cornelius, please stand, is a passionate filmmaker and producer based in South Florida with over 6 years of experience in video promotion and storytelling. An Army veteran and a graduate of Full Sail University, Joshua specializes in creating compelling documentaries and narratives that inspire and inform, such as the one you will see now. A Ray of Hope is the title, and it highlights the story of one of Selah Freedom's survivors. Joshua?
As she said, my name is Joshua Cornelius, and I will keep this short and sweet because I'm not used to being in front of everybody. But yes, I'm the producer and director of A Ray of Hope. But I think I want to start with thanks. First, I want to thank Mia for being so open and vulnerable in this documentary, for allowing me to tell her story. And because of her, it will touch thousands and thousands of people's lives. And hopefully they can understand that there is hope and that whatever they're going through, they can make it out. I want to thank Selah for being on the front lines and fighting the good fight and working with these men and women every single day, pulling them out of the situations and helping them. I want to thank the crew who helped me along the way, helped me with the editing and everything else. Without them, I couldn't do it. And I want to thank y'all. I appreciate y'all showing up. There's a lot more people than I thought, and I'm really happy. So this is cool. And lastly, I want to thank God for just giving me this opportunity. Let me be able to use my skills to reach people and hopefully make a positive change in this world. So, thank you. I think my final question is, what impact do you hope your story will have on others?
Today, I have something that I didn't before, and that is I'm truly happy with who I am today. I hope in sharing my stories, I can inspire other survivors and their family to really believe that change is possible, that freedom is possible.
Can you describe yourself?
Sure. I would describe myself as a kind person, a caring person. I'm passionate about helping others, especially those that are closest to me. I think one of my strong suits, one of my skill sets is communicating. I enjoy talking with and interacting with other people. My friends would say I'm funny. Well, I hope they would. So I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I grew up in the suburbs on the south side of Jacksonville. I am raised by my aunt and uncle. They're the only parents that I've ever known, so I've never called them anything but mom and dad. I longed for approval and acceptance. I wanted to feel a part of, I wanted to feel wanted, I wanted to feel special. I kind of always felt like less than. I always kind of felt like something was missing or that I wasn't good enough in elementary school, middle school. I remember crying because I never thought I would be, considered beautiful because I didn't look like the standard at that time, which was like, Britney Spears, Jessica Simpson, blonde hair, blue eyes, all that. And that's what I was surrounded with, right? So I was surrounded with with people that didn't really look like me. I was one of few children of color at that time. The summer before 8th grade, I made a new friend. There was a girl that moved in right down the street from me, and she was the epitome of everything that I wanted to be, right? She was tall, she was beautiful, blonde hair, blue eyes, super popular, super mature. Like everybody wanted to be her friend. She was like cool. And because we lived so close, she wanted to be my friend, right? So with this friendship, I gained like this newfound popularity. People all of a sudden, recognized me. People all of a sudden wanted to talk to me. And being that, kind of spoke to that insecurity, played into that insecurity I had for so long. Once I had it, I didn't want to lose it. So I was willing to do anything to keep that feeling of acceptance, to keep that feeling of wanting to be wanted. So I kind of engaged in some of the things that she was doing, smoking, cigarettes, boys, drinking, and eventually drugs as well. When I got to high school, things really started to take a downward spiral from there. Those habits that I kind of created just kind of took over my life. As far as my relationship with my parents at that time, it had become strained, right? Because I was an honor roll student. I was, receiving awards for FCAT scores. I was doing well in school. I wasn't getting in trouble. And now I was. Now my grades are tanked. My parents are getting calls from the school, either telling them that I didn't come to class or that, I'm failing their class. And my parents really did try everything that they could to get me back on track. But in my mind, that wasn't who I was anymore. After ninth grade on, pretty much it was just a downward spiral. It just got worse and worse and worse. And my behaviors and the things I was doing got more and more risky. I was doing more drugs, hanging out with guys. Some guys were older, some were my age. And my behavior really did shift. Around the age of 16, I was invited to a party by a guy that I thought liked me, that I liked. And I was told the party was going to be one thing, but it turned out to be something else. When I got there, I was given some drugs by a friend of his and almost immediately blacked out. And then at that party, I was raped several times. And after that, unfortunately, in my life, that was only one instance of sexual abuse, sexual assault. So all of these instances, all of these things, all this trauma that had collected over time, in my mind, it kind of defined me. It defined who I was. By the time I was 17, I was fully addicted to substance. No substance in particular, whatever I could get my hands on, I would take it. I met a rougher crowd of people in a rougher area. And eventually, I made friends with this man. I was 17 at the time, and he was 28, I want to say. And he spoke to every vulnerability that I had ever had, right? So this desire, this want to feel special, to feel accepted, to feel important, he did that for me. He gave me a purpose. He gave me attention. He made me feel special. And it turned out that the women that he kept in his company, that he was trafficking them, and he always made me feel like I was better than that, right? That they were just here pretty much, and I actually was special. I meant something to him. That I was above that. And that only lasted for so long until, things got rough. And we were together one night, and he told me that he needed me. He needed me to do something for him. He needed me to do this date and give it to him, right? And if I was down for him, if I cared about him the way he cared about me, that I would do it. And that was kind of my introduction into that world, into that lifestyle. Eventually, things kind of fizzled out. It wasn't until I met my last trafficker that I realized what the life really was like. I feel like up until that point, I was kind of living in this fantasy, like what I saw on TV at a young age. And he flipped the script on me and really showed me how little control, how little power I really had. I was with him for about 2 years. And in that time, I faced many struggles, many hardships, and a lot of danger. I was using drugs intravenously. So with that comes its own set of dangers, right? You never know what it is that you're putting in your body. It could have been anything. It could have been, I could have overdosed. I could have been poisoned. He was a very violent man. I went through a lot of abuse during my time with him. It looked very much like psychological hold, mental bond, in fear, lots of fear. I was fearful of not only what he'd do to me, but what he'd do to my family, what he would do to the people that would try to help me. Often he would describe, how he would kill me and how he would dispose of it and how nobody would care because I was just a junkie. I was in jail for a couple of weeks. I called my family. I told them I'm taking this deal. I want to get away. When I was offered the drug court program, it was like I kind of saw a door open slightly. I called my family and I told them a little bit about what had been going on with me, who he was to me, and I asked for their help, and they said that they would. I tracked down my case manager at the time and just spill my guts, spill everything about the last 2 years, about who this man was, and what I'd been going through. And she was kind of taken aback. She'd never heard of anything like this happening to anybody. She never had a case like mine. But because she knew of my drug history, she knew that I needed to get somewhere and get clean. She sent me to detox. I was in detox for about 9 days before I got transferred to a rehab facility in Jacksonville, where I was only supposed to stay for 30 days. Finally, somebody from the Open Doors Network came to meet with me. And it just so happened that they had just been on a tour of this wonderful organization called Selah Freedom. And they were like, we know how to help you. We're going to call this organization, like they specialize in sex trafficking cases, sex trafficking victims. And that didn't feel right to me either. But I said, okay. So after being introduced to Selah and having people say, we have a place for you, we can help you. It was the first glimmer of hope that I felt in a long time. I wasn't 100% sure that it would work, right? But I felt like whatever they had to offer was more than I had. They did not give up on me and say, okay, she's just going to ride out her stay here and and that's it. My time at Selah was truly transformative in every sense of the word, right? I came in and I was lost and broken and angry and bound spiritually, emotionally, mentally. And what I found at Selah was a true sense of freedom. And that's not something that I ever thought was possible for someone like me. While I was there, I formed connections and relationships, not only with other residents, but with staff. And that became like family. When I came, I had not got my GED. I dropped out of high school, so I didn't have a diploma. Through Selah's help, through their resources, I was able to get my GED and start college courses as well. They helped me repair the relationship with my parents, right? They helped me come clean about some of the things that I had been keeping from them, some of the abuse, the sexual abuse I had suffered, at a young age. We were able to talk about that and heal and repair our bond. all of these things, everything that I needed to truly be set up for success on my own, they helped me with. They walk survivors through that. Six, 7 years ago, if you asked me, if I loved myself, the answer would have been no. I probably would have looked at you and laughed. But that person feels like there's such a disconnect from that person today, because not only did I learn how to love and, bond with others, but I've truly bonded with myself, and I love who I am today. Self-esteem, low self-esteem was something that I struggled with as long as I can remember, as early as elementary school. And that's not to say that I don't have bad days today, right? Like, I struggle, I fall short, but I'm truly happy with who I am today. And my worst day today is still better than any day in my old life, any day of that old version of me that was sad and broken and desperate to be anybody but who she truly was.
Thank you, Joshua. Let's give him another round of applause. Our second panelist is Lori Swink. She is co-founder of Selah Freedom and the director of consulting. Before Selah Freedom, Lori had a teaching career that she loved. Then she learned about sex trafficking. When she realized survivors coming out of sex trafficking were only at the beginning of their journey, not the end, Lori's heart was moved to establish residential safe homes here in Florida where the survivors could receive trauma therapy, educational and career assistance, and the chance to accomplish the life dreams they were created to live. Because of the dedicated team, Selah Freedom has been able to help over 6,000 trafficking survivors and has trained over 100 organizations in 20 states and 5 countries. In 2022, Lori was chosen as Bay News 9's Everyday Hero. Then in 2023, she was nominated for the Waves of Change honoree by the Center for Women and was also chosen for the 2023 Tampa Bay Lightning Hero Award. Lori considers her work with the survivors both a privilege and an honor. Did I steal your microphone? I have Sumner.
Hi. Thank you so much for carving out the time to be here today. And I just want to speak for a couple of minutes about Selah Freedom. We've been doing this for about 14 years. And like Andrea just said, we've been able to help over 7,000 survivors in that time. And yet, there is still a need. Our residential homes are on a 2 to 3 month wait list. And but we do know that when we are able to give them the wraparound services, that it does make a difference. And just like Mia's story, we could literally spend hours up here today just talking about all of the survivors who have been able to truly step into the life they were created to live. So, I gotta do this. Okay, do both of these. Here we go. And like Andrea said too, 87% of the survivors that graduate our programs do not return to life. So at one of our graduations, it was so cute because one of the graduates was speaking and she said, "Finally, I'm a taxpayer." I don't know many of us that get excited about that, right? There are so many things that we take for granted that really, when people get to step into a life that is valuable and purposeful for them, those things mean a lot to them. So typically, when people find out about trafficking, they want to know, how can I become part of the solution? So in the 14 years that we've been able to do this, we've actually created 5 programs to address all of the issues that really surround not only bringing resources to the survivors, but addressing this anti-trafficking movement that is exponentially growing in not only in the state of Florida, but in our state, in our country, as well as globally. So the first program that we have is called our outreach program, and those are the staff that work. They are the first point of contact with our survivors. So they are building that relationship. They are also offering them services. You're going to be hearing more about the Tyler program from Nicole today, how important that is. That's working with the judicial system. You're going to hear more from Captain Dimitri about the work that we do with law enforcement and the training, and how that creates the ability to really address the issue from the judicial approach, the law enforcement approach, and service providers. And then we have our residential program that Mia just shared about. You know, it's when a person gets out of trafficking, that's really the beginning. It's not the end. What you have to do is provide wraparound support for them to be able to do life differently. One of the things that we do at Selah Freedom is we get to the root of the issue. So many times when people are going to detox, it's just dealing with the symptoms. But what's the root of why it happened? And so with the survivors, so many times they've lost their purpose in life. They've lost their identity. Sexual abuse happens. And all of a sudden, everything has a different meaning to it. And so while people will say, well, you know, why don't you just get out of it? You're not being held in chains. Why don't you just go to law enforcement? Because, you know, those are the same things that I asked before I really understood what was happening. This is my hometown. So driving down Tamiami Trail, I remember seeing people out there on the streets and thinking, why don't you just go get a job? Like, I've got a job, just go get a job. But then once you start learning about why they're there and how so many of their choices have been stolen, it makes a difference. Then we have our awareness program, and those are our people who are out there sharing with the community about what the problem is and how they can become part of the solution. And part of that solution is fundraising. We do not charge anything to the survivors for all of the services that we provide for them with the trauma therapy, with getting employment opportunities, with getting reunited with their children. And by the way, we have had over 60 children reunited with their mothers, which is, yeah, great news. So we're literally yes. It's changing that generational curse to a generational blessing. And then our prevention program, getting on the front end of this. We have written curriculum from kindergarten to 12th grade, age appropriate, to help students understand, boys and girls understand how they can protect themselves, and it's done in a very fun and interactive way. We need to get in front of this so that our children are not our future residents at our safe houses. And then consulting. So what we have done is, you know, there's people all over the United States, all over the state of Florida wanting to do what we're doing. So what we've been able to do is provide resources and training based on our successes and our mistakes, right? So that they can have the policies and procedures and the manuals to be able to get their resources rolling in their community in a very safe and effective way. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to change this for Bree. Okay.
Next panelist is someone very special to all of us. I'm only going to use her first name for privacy purposes. But Bree is a dedicated human trafficking victim advocate and a survivor leader, using her lived experience to guide and support other survivors in their healing journey. As the outreach team lead with Selah Freedom and a caseworker for our Turn Your Life Around, otherwise known as Tyla Court, a diversion program, she also facilitates groups in the Sarasota County Jail and collaborates with local law enforcement in anti-trafficking operations. She is employed now with Selah Freedom since February of 2019, and she is passionate about raising awareness of human trafficking here in Florida and throughout the United States. Welcome, Bree.
Hello, everyone. As she said, I am Bree. I am a survivor graduate of the Selah Freedom Residential Program and an outreach advocate with Selah Freedom. So I guess I will start this by giving thanks to God, because without him, I would not be here today. And I had some help along the way with the amazing angels he sent me with the Selah Freedom organization. I grew up here in Sarasota in a broken home, and I, like Mia, always felt different. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I didn't have love for myself, and I didn't feel loved. So as a child, that's a really difficult place to be. This photo here was taken shortly before my innocence was taken from me, and the false narrative that I learned was that my body did not belong to me. So that led me down a path of seeking love and validation in any way that I could, whether it was, bad attention or good attention, it was attention. I started hanging out with the rougher crowd, getting into trouble at school at an early age, feeling suicidal, and way too young to be having those big feelings. I turned to drugs. I started using when I was about 13, and again, experienced abuse by a family member, which led me feeling more broken and vulnerable. And my using progressed. I didn't want to feel how I was feeling inside, because oblivion was better than the pain that I was feeling. So I was getting into more trouble at school. I ended up getting expelled, and I got into a relationship when I was that age, and I thought that this was my person. He was a high school dropout, drug addict, and he introduced me to harder substances, and that's when I really fell in love. I really found what I thought was my purpose. Like, I'm meant to party. This is it. This is great. I don't have to feel how I've been feeling. Sign me up. So, again, like the validation seeking continued until I fell into the arms of a trafficker, my first trafficker at the age of 22 here in Sarasota. At first, he provided that love and validation that I desperately needed, but quickly turned into abuse and control and manipulation and hatred. Self-hatred ran really deep. I didn't know that there was a way out. I thought that I was going to die and on the streets with a needle in my arm, and I was okay with that for a long time. He ended up going to jail. I got away from him, and again, fell into the arms of another trafficker. I was with this last trafficker a very short period of time. He ended up getting arrested by the awesome law enforcement at Sarasota Police Department, and that's when I met Selah Freedom. Selah Freedom came to the scene and offered me a way out, but at this point I had this very much street mentality, like, I don't trust you. What do you want from me? Like, who are you? You must want something from me, because, right, that's what I learned. my whole life. That's what I learned. Nobody cares. People just want to take and take and take. So I said no. I said, I'm good. No thanks. I wasn't ready to stop using, and I certainly wasn't ready to face the trauma. But they never gave up. They pursued me. You know, statistics say that it takes like 6 to 8 points of contact for a survivor to become ready for change and ready to get out of their situation. For me, it was a little bit longer. I think I would say like a year and a half. I was continuing to run from myself and my trauma. And they kept showing up and showing up and showing up. I'm like, okay, maybe they don't want anything from me. You know, maybe they really want to help. This is weird, but okay. And finally, towards the end of my road, I was so spiritually broken and just desperate. And, you know, my father had just passed away from an overdose. And I didn't want my daughter to feel the same. You know, like, why didn't mommy love me? Why didn't she care to have me and get better? I didn't want that. So I called up Selah and I said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to change. Whatever that looks like, I'm ready. And it was a difficult journey. I was very stubborn and probably very hard to work with. I wanted to change so badly, but I just didn't know how. And I was met with love and grace and kindness. And, you know, they took us to Disney World. What? It was incredible. And, you know, I got the trauma healing, the trauma resolution treatment, which was an absolute game changer for me. Because like I said, I had used drugs behind my trauma for a very long time. And in order for me to be successful, that trauma needed to be healed. And Selah gave me that opportunity. And today, you know, I get to be that person for other survivors that are wanting help and that are stuck in the same cycle that I was stuck in. I get to advocate for them. I get to chase them like I was chased, and, you know, and never give up, and let them know that there's a way out and there is freedom, and you can have a life beyond anything you've ever imagined. Like, if you were to tell me 8 years ago, like, this is where I would be, I would laugh in your face. I would laugh in your face and say, there's no way, I'm not gonna make it to 23. But here I am, I'm alive, and I get to do cool things like speak at a prosecutor convention, and, you know, in a room full of prosecutors, and I get to go on, you know, be a part of sting operations and help shine a light into the darkness of sex trafficking. And life is great today. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. I have a relationship with my daughter. She calls me mom, and I get to be there for her. I get to show her, you know, she can accomplish anything that she puts her mind to. And yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Thanks.
There you go. There you go. That's why we're all here today. Mia, Bree, others here in the audience who are survivors, and all the countless others out on the streets, American boys and girls out on the streets. We want to help them. Before I introduce the next panelist, I just want to say, yes, we are going to have a question and answer period at the conclusion of this panelist discussion. And how we're going to work it is that while you're listening to each panelist, if you have a question that is directed to any of the panelists, please email us on your smartphone at info@selahrfreedom.com. Just state your name and your title, or if you want to be anonymous, that's fine. Put your question and who it's directed to, and we'll be able to conduct our Q&A accordingly. Okay, again, info@selahrfreedom.com. Our next panelist, Nicole Dolick. Nicole is a graduate from University of New Haven, who holds a bachelor's in criminal justice with a concentration in investigative services and a minor in psychology. She also holds a certification in Victim Services Administration. She then furthered her education with a master's in national security. Nicole is designated as a victim services practitioner through the Florida Crime Prevention Training Institute. She has been employed with Selah Freedom since 2019, and she currently serves as the coordinator of Turn Your Life Around, TILA, Court Diversion Program here in Sarasota and Manatee counties. Through Selah Freedom Outreach, she supervises Sarasota, Manatee County jail groups and facilitates curriculum on life skills for human trafficking survivors in the community. And if not, that isn't enough, she is also an adjunct professor at the University of Tampa teaching human trafficking. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So today we're all here for the same reason, right? We have this passion to eradicate sex trafficking and bring awareness to what it actually entails. So there were a couple common themes between Mia's story, Bree's story, and a lot of survivors that I have encountered. And that is they get caught in this cycle of the criminal justice system. Maybe they are picked up starting off as a prostitution charge. But as we heard from these stories, addiction lies heavy because of the complicated trauma. And because of this, sometimes these women then get picked up for other charges as well. Think drug possession charges, other forced criminality, such as theft. And because of this, the only way to form a solution would be a court diversion program. And I'm here to talk about that because in the 12th Circuit, we do have TILA Court, Turn Your Life Around Court. So this started over a decade ago. And it started with just those prostitution charges. And Selah Freedom, being a nonprofit, approached Sarasota Police Department and had a conversation around these women that keep getting caught up in this system. They keep being incarcerated over and over again. And that conversation led to the talk about how this is the symptom of trauma. They keep ending up in this cycle, and there has to be treatment. So treatment courts are typically formed as a solution. For example, drug court was created to help individuals that are addicts. And as a symptom of their addiction, they end up in the system, they enter a treatment program, graduate drug court, and from that continue on. So these women that are in TILA court end up in a treatment program. They get to progress through the phases of TILA court. And let me tell you, everyone that's at the table of TILA court is trauma-informed. We have awesome judges, attorneys, and then the advocates at Selah Freedom that all come together for the survivor's best interest. And here we're addressing each individual based on their needs. Each treatment plan is going to look different, but the solution is that treatment. And as they progress, once they graduate from the TILA court program, what happens is typically either their charges will be dismissed or some of them are on the verge of getting their first felony and it will be a withhold. And that's a huge deal for these women to not have to be a felon. So we're able in the 12th Circuit to offer this solution. And as you see on this slide, over 50% of these survivors get to graduate. And through TILA court, we're shifting that perspective that these are not criminals. These are victims, and they need treatment. So also parallels in the story is that they get into trouble more than once. They're approached by law enforcement, they're approached by advocates more than once. And what happens is They have this distrust in the system in the beginning, and like Bree touched on, it takes multiple touch points. As you see on this slide, the recidivism rate for those that graduate the Tyler Court program is only at 12%. So we're finally ending that cycle of them caught up in the criminal justice system. If you look at studies for other treatment courts, typically the graduation rate is around 30%. So we're very successful with Tyler Court being over 50. And I want to bring your attention to the recidivism rate for those that do not graduate Tyler Court, 44%. And that statistic does not include those that were then sentenced to prison and those that unfortunately lost their life. So here in the 12th Circuit, we're offering a solution for these survivors and a way for them to finally turn their lives around. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Captain Dimitri Konstantopoulos of the Sarasota Police Department. Captain Konstantopoulos has over 30 years of dedicated public service as a law enforcement professional and has served in many capacities, including task force officer with the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, street crimes officer, narcotics detective, street crimes sergeant, SWAT team leader, shift commander, commander of the Office of Internal Affairs, commander of the Patrol Division, and commander of the Support Services Division. While serving as a street crimes sergeant, Captain Konstantopoulos experienced personal and professional transformation while spearheading a prostitution diversion program called Tyler Court. That signaled a paradigm shift in law enforcement's response to victims of sexual exploitation. For this initiative, Dimitri co-authored the Tyler Training Manual, where he trained numerous law enforcement agencies throughout the state of Florida and presented the program to the National Center of Sexual Exploitation in Washington, D.C. Captain Konstantopoulos earned his Bachelor of Applied Science in Homeland Security from the State College of Florida, and he holds a Master's in Public Safety from Liberty University. The captain is also a graduate of Leadership Sarasota and the FBI National Academy. Welcome, Captain Konstantopoulos.
Thank you, Andrea. I want to thank you for all your hard work putting this together. Fantastic job. There are moments in life where God's influence is undeniable. The partnership between the Sarasota Police Department and Selah Freedom and the creation of the Tyler program is one of those moments. That's what I truly believe, and I will believe that to my last dying day. Sometimes I think God has a funny sense of humor because at the beginning of this, I picture him up. They were going, okay, who can we bring together to put together this program? So we're going to bring together a nonprofit, and let's see who we're going to pair them up with. A bunch of cops. This is going to go great, and then throw in a bunch of attorneys afterwards. So, but I say this because there were many challenges at the beginning. I've got many stories where this endeavor could have been sidelined. It was, and Ms. Dolak, I think you gave us some grace. You showed us some grace in the way you explained this. But about 12, 13 years ago, when Selah Freedom came to the police department and said, "Hey, we want to partner with you to help combat your sex trafficking problem," we looked at them and said, "Well, we don't have a sex trafficking problem. We have a prostitution problem." And they looked at us cross-eyed and said, "Exactly. That's what we want to help you with." And we really didn't realize the correlation between prostitution and sex trafficking. And at that time, I'd been a police officer for 18 years, and really was a skeptic in this new endeavor we were going to participate in with Selah Freedom. I think that in my upbringing and upbringing of other officers, in my generation, prostitution specifically was categorized as a vice crime, along with gambling. It's, no one's affected, no harm, no foul, but we really didn't understand the root issues that are in play here, and why and how someone ends up out in this life of darkness. So, quick story, which really signified a turning point in our relationship with Selah Freedom, and it signified the acceleration of the TILA program. And I think back at the beginning, as law enforcement officers, and I'll speak for myself, I thought, okay, you know what, we'll get into this. I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, but if we can save one person, then we'll call it a win. So one day we were out on the street crimes unit, and the purpose of that day was to do some outreach, to meet women out on the street, introduce them to counselors from Selah. And one of my officers pulled over a vehicle, had two young women in the car, male driver. He was older. Investigative interviews. We all went over there. The counselor from Selah said, "Hey, you mind if I talk to these girls?" Because they had clammed up a little bit. They didn't feel it freely to speak. And within a few minutes, the story was that these girls had been duped. They were from Ohio. They came down to Sarasota, met a guy online, and he promised them a great time, come down here for spring break. Unbeknownst to them, he had malintent, and very quickly they found themselves in this predicament as he started taking pictures of them and started taking them down a path that they didn't want to be involved in. And really by the end of that day, after we interviewed them and figured out their story and understood that this man was, in fact, a trafficker, we were able to take them away from him. He was arrested on a minor driving charge, and we were happy to get them back to Ohio, contacted their parents, and that was a great ending to that day. But I think at that point moving forward, that was the realization of, this is here in Sarasota. We're not immune. And, this is a wonderful program. And that's when we started to really dig in and create the TILA program. And, we're a little pressed for time. A lot of great things came about that. But again, many, many challenges. People ask me, especially at the beginning, do we really have a sex trafficking problem here in Sarasota, and really what does that look like? And again, the false belief that, people want to be out there on the street. Women choose this life, which couldn't be further from the truth. This picture is a terrible picture. It's a heinous picture. This woman who was trapped in the life of prostitution was scalped by her pimp, her trafficker, right here on the streets of Sarasota. Thank God we were able to intervene and charge that male, but it does exist. And this is, all the stories, all the time and effort, this is what it's all about, is, getting out there, bringing awareness to the community, intervening, helping women through the TILA program, and change their life, turn their lives around, and provide them an avenue of escape. Again, in Sarasota, what does sex trafficking look like? And let me say this, that sex trafficking is not just a Sarasota problem, it's a global problem. It's a estimated $45 billion a year. That's the profits that are generated that rival drug trafficking. And those numbers are probably low. And sex trafficking comes in many forms, certainly street prostitution and prostitution online. This is an illicit massage parlor on the North Tamiami Trail that we were able to shut down. And these things exist in Sarasota. But very quickly, once we find out that these of their existence, we're able to eradicate them pretty quickly. So this is a picture of me, and just a story that will forever be burned in my heart. A survivor, Brandy, who was really our first big success story. Brandy had been on the streets here in Sarasota for 10 years, came from a life of extreme trauma, and that trauma was magnified during her time out on the street. And to be honest, many of us, really didn't have a lot of hope that we were going to be able to help Brandy get out of this life just because of all the trauma that she accumulated throughout the years. And just to fast forward, and this is a reminder to me about skepticism, faith. All things are possible with God, for sure. And on this day, this was a reunion. I hadn't seen Brandy in quite a while, and she, really, when you talk about turn your life around, she had completed the Tyler program. She graduated the program. She had a job. She was reunited with her family. Her mom was here on this day. Her son, who had been taken away from her, was here on this day. And a little side note to that, he was getting ready to go to medical school. So really just, what's that? He's a doctor now. So, I mean, just amazing. And to hear, and I go back to, if we could only save one, and to hear the stat that Lori threw out, 6,000 people have been assisted, rescued. It's incredible. Many times as a law enforcement officer, you don't get to see the results of your work. Here, and this is why it was so impactful for me, and I'll stop after this, is, what's the value of one person's life? How do you quantify that? It's an amazing thing, and just to have a small role in that has really enhanced my life, enhanced my career. Thank you.
That was amazing, as always. All right, before I introduce the next panelist, a reminder, please email your questions to info@selahfreedom.com so that we could have our Q&A following these panelist discussions. Next, Special Agent Nicholas Ingeno is currently the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Homeland Security Investigations Office in Tallahassee, Florida. In addition to the Tallahassee location, he oversees 3 resident agent in charge of offices, including Panama City, Pensacola, and Gainesville. His area of responsibility includes 19 counties in North and Western Florida. Again, I want to reiterate that Florida is the number 3 state for sex trafficking. Prior to being selected as Assistant Special Agent of Homeland Security in Tallahassee, he served as a Supervisory Special Agent for the Violent Crimes and Public Safety Group at Homeland Security in Washington, D.C., where he oversaw a team of 8 special agents, 1 criminal analyst, and 1 investigative assistant, specializing in transnational criminal organization investigations. For 3 years, he worked at HSI headquarters in Washington, D.C., serving as the Deputy Chief of Staff for International Operations. There he served as a strategic and trusted advisor to the Assistant Director and Deputy Assistant Director as they led a division of over 500 personnel located throughout Washington, D.C., as well as 80 international offices in 53 countries. Let's welcome Nicholas in general.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Assistant Special Agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigations. I'll just give you a little background on our agency because we're the biggest agency no one's ever heard of. We're the principal investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security. We're the second largest criminal investigator unit of the federal government with about 7,000 special agents across the world. Human trafficking has always been a priority for our agency from the beginning of time, but I did want to talk about something kind of fairly new that began in 2020. It's our Center to Combat Human Trafficking. And what's unique about that is it takes a whole DHS approach to combating this problem. It's led by HSI, and what they've really done is law enforcement, like we're good at investigating, we're good at arresting, but what we're not always good at is after, right? When we have victims, we're not built for that. And in crimes like this, the victims are the most important part, bigger than the prosecution, bigger than everything else. So we really took a step forward in how do we address these problems? How do we stabilize these victims after the fact? And obviously we can't do it alone. You know, organizations like Selah Freedom and other NGOs are very important to us to get resources that we don't have. But we really want to stabilize that. So we have certain programs called victim assistant coordinators that they're trained on forensic interviewings to sit down with victims and really, you know, be able to talk to them a lot better than someone like I could. I think one of the most important things that I could talk about, and I kind of changed up a little bit when I heard everyone's stories, is when you hear stories like me and Bree, it's very important, right? Because when I came into this job, I had a visual of what I thought human trafficking was, this Hollywood sensationalization of what's going on. And while that does happen, it's not as prevalent as, you know, Hollywood makes it. But these other stories really show what human trafficking is, right? It's really human exploitation. And it's really a crime against not only the body, the soul of these people that have to heal after the fact, right? So it's terrible, and I think, you know, the public learning what it actually is, what it can be. We talk about prostitution. Yes, prostitution can be as simple as prostitution. But, you know, when you peel back that layer and you start seeing what the underworld that's going on to it, that's when you start building your investigation to human traffickers. The program Ms. Dolak talked about, that's extremely important for law enforcement because we run into victims all the time that have these minor warrants, right? Theft, drug use that, you know, legally we're bound to do things, right? But we also, anyone who does this type of crime doesn't want to prosecute a victim. We don't want to re-traumatize the victim. We want to help the victim, right? We want to, you know, we'll drop cases if the victim doesn't want to go forward. And one of the big things, you know, is partnership, right? We have partners, you know, and I will say I worked all over the country, and I can tell in Florida, you know, it's very lucky here to have all law enforcement, prosecution, and NGOs really shine a light on this, very aggressive. There's two big task forces in the state of Florida, in Jacksonville and Fort Myers. You know, they're partner with NGOs. They're called Intercept Task Forces. I suggest you kind of look it up. I see that as kind of a blueprint going forward to kind of target this. Sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit. But, you know, really learning these stories, really helping the victims is the way to go. You know, I think they said $45 billion across the world. It's estimated that 28 million people are human trafficked across the world, with about 20% being sex trafficking. So what is that, about 6 million? And let's be honest, where does that number come from? That's probably well underreported. And then if you start throwing in crimes against children, internet crimes against children, which different statute, different definition, but it's all on the same line of things. That, especially after COVID, that's really just exploded with people using the internet. So, you know, I'll just leave it as, you know, education on this is very important, and really understanding what human trafficking can be is important. I think I have some stats up here from HSI just to kind of show you. So this is our 2024 human trafficking stats. 1,600 investigations, 2,500 arrests, and 818 victims. If you add in child exploitation and crimes against children, that's another 4,800 investigations and another 1,900 children rescued. That's a big number, and that's just one agency. That's not our other federal partners, that's not the state partners. So this is really a worldwide crime. This is happening in everyone's community. Whether you're rich, poor, any community, this is going on. So, you know, I thank everyone for being here and shining light on this and giving me the opportunity to speak.
Impressive. Our final speaker is Dr. Sandra Stone. She's a professor of criminology and the assistant dean for graduate studies here at the University of South Florida. Her primary research interests are in family violence, juvenile delinquency, juvenile justice, women in crime, public policy, and program evaluation. She is a faculty affiliate in the University of Southern Florida's Trafficking in Persons Risk to Resilience Lab, and has been involved with the lab since its inception, working with colleagues on a number of projects on human trafficking. In addition, she and two colleagues on this campus conducted a comprehensive program evaluation of us, Selah Freedom, and she served as evaluators for a federally funded action research project that included Selah Freedom as the coordinator of direct services to victims of human traffic for an 8-county area around Tampa Bay, operating in conjunction with the Tampa Bay Human Trafficking Task Force. She currently serves on the Advisory Council for Selah Freedom, as well as being involved in many other community organizations. Let's welcome Dr. Sandra Stone.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Selah Freedom for putting together this event. It's really important that we reach out and involve the community. And I'd like to thank you all for coming. And as a representative of my campus, I work here. I'd like to welcome you to our campus and invite you to take some time and walk around and enjoy it when you're done here. I'm really pleased today to represent the Trafficking in Persons Risk to Resilience Research Lab that was established at USF in 2020 by Dr. Joan Reed. It was originally started from a seed grant internally, and it's comprised of an interdisciplinary group of faculty and students across all 3 USF campuses who share an interest in and concern about human trafficking. Through our various types of work, as you can see on the slide, we are committed to building knowledge about all aspects of human trafficking, identifying and sharing information about available resources to address it, and disseminating what we learn to different audiences in an effort to make an impact on the problem. Initially, we conducted a needs assessment to determine how we could best focus our efforts. We interviewed over 100 people representing law enforcement, social service providers, healthcare workers, government officials, the faith community, legal services, and others, and 2 main themes emerged. One was a need for accurate data and a need for information about available services and a way to get victims to services in a timely manner. Consequently, in addition to individual members' own research, the lab is focused on building capacity in those 2 areas. Year before last, the Florida legislature designated the Trafficking in Persons Lab as the statewide central repository for human trafficking data. The statute mandates that all state agencies in Florida that collect human trafficking data, as well as all other agencies that provide human trafficking services and receive state funds, share their data with the TIP lab. The lab will also collect data from private providers who are willing to share, as well as from survivors themselves. We are trying to get a whole comprehensive look at what's happening in Florida, and as you know right now, there is no real accurate central data source, so we're trying to become that. That will allow us to provide a more accurate picture of human trafficking in Florida and provide the data that agencies and other providers need to better target resources for improved effectiveness. The other major project that we're working on is called BRIGHT, or Bridging Resource and Information Gaps in Human Trafficking. We have developed an interactive online network that providers can use to identify services in real time and connect survivors quickly. It also allows for reports to help identify service utilization as well as gaps in care. To join the network, providers are carefully vetted and every effort is made to protect survivor identification and confidentiality. The network connects survivors to services in real time, and it's a free service for service providers. The map on this slide indicates service providers that have been identified so far in the state of Florida, with the darker colors representing areas with the more concentrated providers. 588 organizations have been identified, and 60 of those are now in our BRIGHT system, sharing information and resources. The average response time to get a survivor to a service is now 40 hours, with the shortest time being 16 minutes, which is a great improvement from before we got this up and running. The system includes referrals statewide, and it allows for multiple referrals to be made at the same time. It also allows case managers to track victims or through follow-up with services to be sure that they're getting where they need to be and getting what they need. We're excited about the progress we've made and that we continue to make to help address human trafficking in Florida. And I think we've lost one slide there, which had our website on it. But we invite you to look us up online and check out our website for additional information about the lab, as well as what some of the individual faculty and students are working on in their individual projects. Thank you so much.
Well, there you go. We have an incredible group of panelists who've shared their stories with you, and we hope that this has been very informative and that we could take this to new levels. In the interim, I will remind you that we are going to do our Q&A now, and I would like to have additional people email us at info@selahfreedom.com with any question that you might have that's directed to one of the panelists. For now, I will start with one question that's directed to Nicholas Ingenno. What role does artificial intelligence and modern technology play in the efforts of Homeland Security to combat sex trafficking?
Yeah, thank you. Technology and AI, technology itself is huge, right? Every case I've worked for human trafficking or has had some kind of online presence or some kind of computer presence. That's not going to stop. I think you can pretty much look at most crimes and say, you know, everyone's basically got a computer in their pocket. So anyone committing crime is going to have some kind of technological component to it. So the trick is, how do we stay ahead of the bad guys, right? And with AI as it grows, how do we not only combat that, but how do we use that to our advantage? One of the things we have is the Cybercrime Center up in Washington, D.C. It's on the forefront of cyber investigations and computer forensics. They have a victim ID lab, and what's really good about that is we can use, and primarily it's used in child exploitation just because there's so much, unfortunately there's just so much of that, where we can, you know, put images in a bank that's obviously protected, and we can find if this victim has been victimized, you know, if they're seeing the same stuff in the UK, if they're seeing the same stuff in Central America. And then we can start hopefully finding the victim. It also has the ability, kind of almost like a reverse image that you would do on the internet, is we've been able to narrow down certain locations of victims and people and things just by looking at the landscape in the background. So it's, you know, I'm not smart enough to know how it works. I wish I was. But it is pretty impressive, and you know, I think that's the direction everyone's moving in, including the criminals, unfortunately. But I know we're really dedicated to that, and it'll continue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Captain Konstantopoulos, what are the key components of the Sarasota Police Department's strategy against sex trafficking?
The key components are, first, that our cases are victim-centered. We put the victims front and center, and with Tyla, we're able to, of course, partner with Selah, and who provides them with wraparound services. Now, conversely, you know, going after the traffickers very harshly, going after anyone who benefits from sexual exploitation, and making sure that they feel the full force of the law.
Thank you. Also, as a community, what is the key to combating sex trafficking?
I think the key, or the key word here is community, because this isn't just a law enforcement issue. This is everyone in the community needing to come together, awareness, understanding what sex trafficking is, understanding that it's on our streets, it's in our schools, making sure that we educate the first responders, not just the police officers, but medical personnel, emergency room staff, teachers, so they can keep their eyes open and identify the risks, the at-risk, we'll say youth, truly, because, again, we're going back to understanding what the root problem is and where it starts, in trying to curb that before it ends up with now someone being trapped in the life of sexual exploitation. Of course.
Yeah, and I think another component is prevention. So, in one of our, we went to a public high school, and we were able to do our prevention program to some young ladies. And at the end, they were asked, what is it that you know now that you didn't know at the beginning? And one of them said, I work at Publix after school. And there's this guy who comes in, he's like in his 30s. And I know he targets my lane because I'll have a couple customers and there'll be, another lane that has no customers. And he comes up to me, he's like, oh, you're really pretty. How old are you? What school do you go to? She's like, I don't know what to say to him because I don't want to be rude. And so our staff was able to say, look, he's the one being rude, and it's okay for you to say, I'm not comfortable with that, and your order's $4.32. And you could see the light bulb go on for her. And then the power of that is that she will meet people in her peer group that we will never meet, that she gets to share that too. So being able to empower these boys and girls to be able to speak up for themselves, a lot of times it can be so simple, but it's so profound in the outcome that it has.
Thank you, Lori. Nicole, question for you. Is there any plans of expanding Tyler Court in other counties?
So,
Or nationally, actually, I'll add
I lost
that.
my voice, so I'm so sorry, everyone. I'll try to get through this very briefly. So, yes, I'm very hopeful for that. I've had the privilege to present to multiple community partners and different conferences such as the FPAA, the Florida Prosecutor Association, and there I've been able to present about Tyler Court and the need for it. So I'm very hopeful that other circuits will pick this up and spread the information. And any other questions, I'll email them back. Thank you.
You did just fine, Nicole. We appreciate it. And I'm glad that I got over my illness last week because I wouldn't be up here today. All right. Actually, there's a question for the superintendent of schools, Dr. Terry Connor, who's in the audience, and I'll bring the mic down. What specific protocols and training programs, if any, has the school district implemented to raise awareness of child exploitation and sex trafficking? Has there ever been victims in your school?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to first just thank Selah Freedom for putting on the summit. Thank our esteemed guests. It's been very eye-opening. On behalf of the school district, in education, our role is primarily academics, but it does extend far beyond that. And we really focus on the safety and the well-being and the future of every student. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of our student services team members here today who work in this area around behaviors and a lot of what the topic that we're talking about today that are exhibited in our schools. And for us, we do have some strategic trainings that we provide to staff. We've partnered with Selah Freedom to work with our counselors and work with our administrators on how to identify and bring awareness to that. But I want to also inform the community too that the state does require, we have modules of required instruction that we are mandated to provide around human trafficking. And so that's something that we take very seriously to ensure that our students understand the aspects, the important aspects of what we're talking about today. As well as social media. We're required to teach about the effects of social media because that becomes the gateway into the world, good and bad, some of these bad actors who get access to our children. And so we teach around the dangers and the effects of using social media. So there's more to do in that area. I think we need, as a next step, to be more strategic in making sure that everyone is getting that training, that awareness, so that they can identify that at a moment's notice. Unfortunately, to the second part of the question around do we have students, I think we've demonstrated today's testimonies that it starts very, very young. And unfortunately, those behaviors are sometimes masked by disciplined behaviors or things that you wouldn't necessarily know are contributions to human trafficking. And sometimes we find out after an arrest. You know, we've had children arrested, and then we've come to find out either they're victims and even some of them are perpetrators. So this extends beyond just adults targeting children. We do have instances where it's at that level. And so we're doing our part. We're committed to expanding that awareness, that advocacy. This team is dedicated to that work, and we thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Okay. My colleague has given me additional questions that came in that I couldn't access on my smartphone. The first is from Christina Allen, and the question is, where is the greatest need right now in assisting victims and survivors? Where, if any, is there a gap in services or communication? And how many minor children are you encountering? I think, Lori, this is a question for you, and I will reiterate the question because it's there's a few. Where is the greatest need right now in assisting victims and survivors?
Well, definitely our residential program. Like I said before, we have a 2 to 3 month wait list of survivors who want this program. They want the opportunity to turn their life around, but we need more funding to be able to expand the services. One thing that's very important to us is that we do have dedicated trained staff that works with them. And so it's very important for the protection of the program, for the protection of each of the survivors, that we have highly skilled people who are working with them.
Second part of that question is where, if any, is there a gap in services or communication?
Where is there a gap in services and communication? I think that, you know, it's still, as much as we eat, live, and breathe this whole anti-trafficking movement, there are still people who still don't know about it. And they still don't know what it means here in the United States, what it means here in our own city. I do have this vision that Sarasota will become the solution center to the state of Florida, and the state of Florida will become the solution center to the United States. There's no reason why that can't happen. We've seen, you know, with the Tyler program, in just a few short years, Captain Robinson shared that trafficking had been reduced by over 90% in Sarasota. When you have law enforcement, judicial system, and service providers working together, it makes a difference. And everybody, you know, we can't do the work that law enforcement does, and we can't do the work that judicial system does, and they can't do the work that we do. But together, we do tremendous, tremendous things together.
Andrew, can I add something in there just for a second? A gap. I just finished, some of us at the TIP lab are just finishing up a study looking at boys and young adult male victims. And that's a big gap in service because people don't recognize that boys and young men are also victims. They're very, very often overlooked. They're not believed. They're they don't come forward because they feel like nobody's going to believe them, or they're treated more like offenders than victims. There are all kind of issues there, but there's a real lack of services and awareness and attention to boys and young men, and that would be a gap I would like to throw out there.
Thank you for contributing.
Yeah, Andrew, if I can jump in. Boys we've seen have more susceptible to online sextortion. I think you've probably seen a lot of cases in the news where we see a lot of teenagers talking to someone over in another country, primarily like Nigeria, the Ivory Coast. They get them to send them some naked pictures, and now they have them, right? We've seen suicides and other things from that. So that's something to pay attention, right? We always often overthink boys and men, but they're victims too. So that's just one thing to think about, especially if you have kids.
And we have been able to help male survivors too, so thank you for bringing that up. That's so true. And one of the things they say is that they're embarrassed because they have so much shame because they feel like they should have been strong enough, to overcome that, when in reality, these predators, they are preying on vulnerable people. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. And, they get caught up, just like the females do, in something that they don't know how to get out of, so.
Another real at-risk population is the LGBTQ plus kids. They're very high risk also, and often they're overlooked as well.
Thank you. Dr. Stone, a question for you. Do you provide awareness and education to your college students?
Not directly through our TIP lab, but we do have a student services arm of the university that does a lot in terms of awareness and events and they offer counseling. They have a lot of outreach services through that office. It's mainly located in Tampa, but we do have people on each of the branch campuses as well who do work in that area.
Thank you. This is a question for Dr. Stone, but it's also a good question for Lori, so I'll ask both of you to answer, starting with Dr. Stone. Sorry. I have a big mouth. I'm from New York, but I guess it's not big enough. Anyway, there's a question for Dr. Stone, but this question also applies to Lori Swink, so I'll ask both to answer. Dr. Stone, how do you provide education and employment opportunities for your graduates?
Specifically, just in general?
Is there someone in the audience, Charlotte, George? Yes. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Okay, graduates of our program, of Selah program. So what we do is we build partnerships in the community with places that the residents would like to work at. So if we haven't built a partnership yet, and there's somebody who would like to be had a machinist, and so we go to these businesses, we explain who we are and what we are doing, and would they be interested in building a partnership with us? For a couple of reasons. One, because we want to be able to expand, the opportunities for all of our survivors, but we don't want their past experiences to ever be held against them.
Thank you. This is a question from Wendy Patrick, and it's for Lori. Approximately how many Selah graduates now work or has worked for Selah, and how and why is that important to the women you're helping?
It's a great question, yes. So we've actually had graduates work in all of our programs now. And you think about the wealth and experience and the wisdom that they bring to the role that they serve, it's second to none. So we're very excited to be able to have them in the prevention program. Mia, mentioned that she was in the prevention program. We have Bree, who's in outreach. We have graduates who are working in our safe houses, also in awareness. Our volunteer coordinator works, is a graduate as well. So we're excited that that is an opportunity that we get to offer to them, to be able to provide a living for themselves, but also we get blessed so much more than they do, that's for sure.
Thank you. The next question is from Megan Taylor. She is the program specialist in Sarasota County Schools Student Services Department. And the question is to all panelists, so I'm not sure who wants to answer this, if not multiple people. The question is, what are the signs of someone who is actively being trafficked or in the grooming stage of the process, specifically school-age students? Going once, going twice.
Well, definitely, I think, Mia touched on it. You see somebody who's a really strong student and all of a sudden they're tanking in their grades. There's something going on there, right? And so trying to, find out, what is happening with them. Also, if you start noticing that your child has some really expensive gifts that you know that they didn't get them from you, and they don't have the ability, to be able to get those expensive gifts, that's something else to look for. As well as, I think there's a lot of shame that can go along with what has happened to them when someone steals your boundaries, or when they're trying to steal your boundaries. And sometimes children don't know how to talk about that. So we do have free training available, Zoom trainings to parents and caregivers on how to have those conversations with them. Because, how do you have those conversations without giving them nightmares, right? And so we have really great resources and training available to help you to have those conversations with your children. But just don't disregard it. Don't think, oh, it's probably hormones. They're probably just having a bad day. Oh, I was like that too. Because all of those things may be true, but there may be something deeper there as well.
I'd like to add, so I think chronic runaways, that is a sign that there's something going on, and something definitely going on at the house, whether it's some kind of physical abuse, mental abuse. And then what happens is they're out on the street, these young kids, and they're looking to fulfill a need. And that's when the trafficker comes in, the predator that's out there on the street, just looking to pounce on these kids that are vulnerable to exploitation. Certainly when we have chronic runaways, that is one of the things that comes to mind.
Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I can
Yes,
just jump in.
Nicholas.
As far as recognizing and training, things like that, HSI has a program called iGuardian. And if you just Google HSI and iGuardian, it should come in. That's geared to special agents who specialize in trafficking and child exploitation, going to schools and talking about the nuances and the traps that these kids can fall into. And we also have a fairly new, I believe it opened in August. It's called Know to Protect. You can Google that too with HSI, that's numeric too. And that's more geared to parents and teachers to recognize signs and as prevention and safety. So if anyone is interested in something like that, if you get in touch with HSI, they'd be more than happy to help.
Thank you. This is for the captain. What could be done if we as the public see sex trafficking taking place?
See something, say something. I know that's a little cliche, but it's very basic and simple. Reach out to the local law enforcement, whether if it's in the city, it's Sarasota Police Department here, county, Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, and make that first report. I think it's a great question because a lot of people are scared. Am I seeing what I'm seeing? They question themselves. They don't want to get involved. For various reasons, but it is so important to make that first call so there can be some intervention.
Thank you. Okay. Anonymous writes, what does someone who may be trafficked look like? What's the profile of someone in the sex trade? And what does a common trafficker look like? What signs can we look for to help report this?
They look just like you. They look like me. There's no difference. You know, I had said before that we were able to go into one of the high schools and do a prevention curriculum, and one of the girls said, you know, what I realize now is that I could be sitting right next to somebody in my class and they could be trafficked and I would never know it. I never expected, she said, I think I expected it was somebody who had a lot of makeup, you know, with stilettos and short skirts, and now I'm realizing it's anybody and it's everybody.
Okay, and this is a question for Joshua. Amazing work with Mia. If other survivors are interested in their story being told via film, what avenue would you suggest they take to identify that opportunity?
Oh, thank you very much. I think the best way is to get in contact with someone they trust. They can always send me an email. I would be happy to speak with them. But I think the biggest thing, telling their story is a big deal, and they have to trust the person they tell it to. It can't, and you have to build a relationship with them so that you know it's done right. So I think trust is a big thing because you don't want to see them exploit just for their story, but there has to be a bigger purpose for telling their story, and I think that's a good thing to stress to them. So whoever asked the question, if you want to give it me, I can give you my email and number, and we can move on from there.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone from the audience who has a question that might have just popped into your mind? The gentleman.
I'm typing and I'm too slow at it, sorry, especially with one finger. But I'd like to direct this to Dr. Stone. If I understood correctly, there's been 548 resources identified, and that's in Florida. And if I also understood correctly, there's 60 that are actually being utilized. Do I have that part of it correct? Or?
No. Right. So 588 that have been identified as providing services to human trafficking survivors all throughout the state. 60 have been vetted and are currently operational in our network, the Bright Network, where they can share information about the services that they have. It's really cool. It's very interactive. You just go in, you say you're looking for housing for a female between the ages of 20 and 35, and it'll pop up with which services are available in the state and which ones have vacancies, and you can connect that person directly so they don't have to be calling around and trying to, so 60 currently, and there are several others that are in the process of being vetted right now, so we'd like to get them all. Yeah.
So I did basically understand. My numbers may have been a little bit off. I did basically understand. So my question is, I guess, with such a need for, it seems like, residential gap services, okay, because I heard about a 3-month waiting time, whatever. So why is there that discrepancy between what seems to be identified and the number that are actually being actively utilized, let's say, services being utilized?
All the services are being utilized. It's just that the 60 are in our network. So we're trying to get everybody involved in this network so that they can talk to each other. So in order to get into this network that we're building, they have to get vetted and be sure that they're safe and that they protect confidentiality of survivor information. That's one thing. That they're legitimate, that they're a legitimate business, that they have some sustainability. One of the problems, particularly with residential, is it's really expensive to operate, and people start up and then they can't afford it, and something happens and they lose their grant. And I know, Laura, you can speak to this, but it's really hard to sustain a long-term residential program because there are multiple needs. These folks have so many needs and things that need to be addressed, and they often need to stay for a very long time. So even residential programs that are there, people don't move through very quickly because sometimes they're there for a year or more. So that's kind of a back-end service that's very expensive, and it's hard to maintain it without some recurring funding supply. So that's one problem. I think it's one of the things that we find is that it's really hard to get an accurate current list of service providers generally because people come and go. And sometimes they're very small organizations. They lose their funding. They lose their staff, who is sort of a driver. They get bought up or merged into a different organization. They changed their focus. I know we've, identified some that started out doing services for human trafficking, but then shifted focus to do substance abuse services. Or it's kind of a kaleidoscope out there for trying to keep track of who's doing what to whom. Sometimes they change who they serve, either broaden or narrow. It's a little bit of a challenge just to kind of keep up with the landscape out there, but we're trying. And what we'd like to do is get as many service providers as possible into this network, so everybody can in the network can know who else is providing services around the state.
And that's what I meant by utilize. I feel like if they're in your network, there's greater utilization, there's better communication, and that's what I meant
Yes.
by that. My follow-up to that was, is there a priority system for the types of resources? In other words, if you're limited to what you can do in the way of vetting, and it's difficult, what do you have a focus as to the type of resources you're trying to get vetted first?
No. Just as we identify agencies and they express an interest, then we, start a vetting process. So.
Okay. We have any other questions here in the audience? Yes.
Okay, I guess this is to the school because I was a teacher. So are you saying that in the state of Florida, because I was up in New York, are you saying that there is a mandate, like when I was teaching, it was, good touch, bad touch. It was fire safety. It was things like that. So are you saying now that Florida says you have mandating human trafficking, or is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So things like substance abuse, social media, human trafficking, there's a litany of required instruction topics that we have to. Human trafficking, social media have been recently introduced in the last few years.
Okay, there was another woman in this row. Yes.
Considering the many recent bans on federal and federally funded DEI programs, as well as other programs supposedly to help marginalized populations, what influence do you think that will have on your organization, as well as state organizations and federal organizations? And I think specifically I'd like to hear from the gentleman from Homeland Security, as well as the captain.
Sure. From our standpoint, a victim's a victim, right? We don't look at any kind of gender, sexual, race, religion. A victim's a victim, and that's how we do. I don't see it changing anything for us. Whether you're a child, an adult, whether you identify as something and not the other. We don't discriminate when it comes to that. We're always going to do our job, and we're always going to take care of the victim first.
And I think you said that perfectly. A victim is a victim. We treat everyone equally. No biases in law enforcement, for sure. And the big picture here is getting people help, no matter who they are.
I think it can have some effect on funding, though, and I think that's something that we're starting to look at, because a lot of the nonprofits get money from the federal government, and and even our organization has some funding from the federal government, and so we're a little concerned about what's going to happen with the funding stream.
Yes.
I think this question is for Nicole. Can someone take advantage of your Tyler program without, Tyler, I keep calling it Tyler, without going through the system, with the court system?
Again, I'll try my hardest to speak. So, in order to qualify for a court diversion program, you would have to have an open charge because it's a court program. But if someone already has a criminal record, they could still utilize Selah's services outside of Tyler Court. And also, we partner with different legal services if they're interested in getting any part of their record expunged. So we work with them in other ways through victim advocacy and the legal system outside of Tyler Court.
Is there anyone else? One moment, we're going to give you the mic.
This is really hard work that you do. How do you prevent burnout?
Good question.
Well, one of our core values at Selah Freedom is balance, for that very reason, because we want to make sure that we, have our staff and volunteers there as long as possible. And so we do offer trauma therapy to our staff, our full-time staff, with Dr. Q. And then also, we watch out for each other. Sometimes it can be very easy just to continue working beyond your capacity, but then we have really great people like Stacy, our executive director. She's like, "Are you going to do flex time? You're going to need to do some flex time." So we just help out each other.
Yeah. We have one more question we could take, and I believe the woman yeah.
If there is like a case manager or a social worker or a lawyer who's working with a sex trafficked person who's interested in a program like Selah Freedom with wraparound services and residential, but they're kind of hesitating on like making that call to Selah Freedom, what is something that can be done to support them and encourage them to take that next step? And my question was intended for Bree, but anyone can answer, I guess.
So, I mean, like I had mentioned, it took many points of contact for me to finally become ready, but just that consistency that I saw from the different advocates with the Selah Freedom organization is, I think, really what did it for me. Just seeing someone show up and be so consistent, like I'd never had that before, and really like gave me the space to become ready, right? Like, one of the outreach advocates that I first met with Selah Freedom, each time she was met with resistance and, turned away, and she would just say, "Okay, that's okay. We'll be here when you're ready." So that was huge for me.
Okay, well, this has been amazing. These questions are very thought-provocative, and we appreciate you submitting them to us. And before we conclude the program, and Stacy, our executive director, comes up to say some final words, I want to say two things. And one, I want to shout out to University of South Florida, especially their technical crew, for working in tandem with us and Christian Television Network. It's been superb working with you, and we appreciate that. And then finally, Chris, again, thank you. Chris, Christian Television Network. And finally, our panelists, the best. All right. Thank you.
They're amazing. And I want to applaud you for being here. We started the conference today with the Pledge of Allegiance, and how does our pledge end? With liberty and justice for all, where human trafficking is the farthest thing from liberty and justice. I've been in social services for over 25 years, and I've heard stories of abuse and neglect, but nothing touches the stories what I've heard from these survivors and what they've had to endure. Unfortunately, we're dealing with an evil that's like no evil I've ever seen. It's going to take the community to come together. And people say, how can you do this work? How can you stay in it? But kind of like you mentioned. And it's our survivors. They're the strongest group of people I have ever met. And they really, really deserve to have that life that they dreamed of, not the life that they've been forced into. So let's give them that life. So real quick, a lot of you are saying, how can I help? How can I get involved? Well, the first thing, educate yourself and your kids. I am so happy that Sarasota Schools is here. Like, I feel like I won the lottery. Yeah, the average age of targets for sex trafficking now is 12 to 14 years old. Parents, educate yourself, educate your kids. We have free trainings online. We will come to your school, we'll come to your church, we'll come to your business. We will train you, help you. If we can arm the kids with knowledge before they are approached by a trafficker, they will have a much better chance of success. So please, and get involved in your kids' phone. They're gonna hate me for saying that. But, volunteer, and I know this is going to other places, so find your local organization that is helping in the anti-trafficking music and volunteer. And then lastly, I have to ask, donate. We have a QR code here. We really do rely on donations from the community. Anything we're grateful for. If you can give $25, $25,000, we'll take it. And we do have a monthly giving program that you can just do monthly if you'd like. So look at our website. There's lots of ways to get involved, and thank you for your time. You guys are now part of the solution. You're part of the Selah Army, so let's go out and make this world a better place.